This ain't
And that's
fair.
it.
This just isn't fair.
And there we go. Wow. And he applauds his opponent.
The Speed Chess Championship is back, and this is Magnus, son of Carl, playing with the white pieces against Tuan Minh Lee, a Vietnamese sensation. It's the quarterfinals. This is one of the longer form games, 5 minutes plus a few seconds per move. That's called increment. What an exciting battle. Love this game. Ends in a round of applause. Let's dive right in. Magnus goes pawn d4 for the score and d5 from Lee. Now we see c4, the most explosive move. e6 from Lee. He says, no thank you Magnus, my tummy's full, I don't want to eat your pawn. Knight f3 played and a6. Hang on, he's thinking about it. Threat to gobble gobble and then go b5. What does Magnus do? Allows it with pawn to g3, setting up one of our favourites, the Catalan. Very few people know this except long-term viewers of this channel. It's named after a chess playing cat called Alan. Do consider subscribing if you ever want to see some of Alan's games. Probably come into the channel one day. Now we see takes. Lee does a gobble gobble, loves himself a sea prawn. He's from Vietnam, big thing for crustaceans out there, stir fried, etc. Now we get bishop g2 and Magnus hits the weakened light square slide. b5 played. Have you gone nuts? Exposing it even more. Well, if you go knight e5 immediately, favourite move of stock squid, then pawn to c6 comes. You cement everything. It's just a different variation. Magnus castles, given the question mark, but we got to ignore that. Now bishop b7 played and a4. Magnus taking the tin opener to the queen side there. Knight f6 carries on the development and now AB. AB, rook's coming off the board, bishop here, still a big game of chicken along this diagonal with the snipers, and knight c3 carries on the development and the game spices up. Because the pawn's under fire, the engine says you can go pawn to c6 here, or bishop c6, or even take the knight, then go pawn to c6, but none of them played. We see b4, but not the most precise move. It opens up a square, Magnus pouncing like a cat, goes queen a4, check. Now hang on a second, because after bishop c6, are you not blundering? Queen's under fire, knight's under fire, how do you save both? Well, sure you can do this, but that's a horrible pin. You know, what about, say, queen to d7? Well, it's actually a mistake. There's two great moves. One is queen a7, hitting here, threatening to take with check, then knight e5 comes, or you can do an immediate knight e5. Let's quickly show this. It's a cool line. You let this one happen, then go queen a5, queen's still under fire, so c6, so you have to go somewhere with the queen, you know, you can take, whatever, check, no good. You're just getting absolutely destroyed. Stuff like this. So, this is why queen d7 wasn't played. Bishop e7 was best, preparing to castle, none of it done. Knight fd7 played, wrong direction Lee. Completely forgets which way his pieces are moving. Makes you kind of wince when you see that one. Given the question, what does Magnus do? Great move. He can go bishop f4, but he goes queen a5. Stock Barnacle is purring here. The bar starting to rise. Now we see takes on b5. Huge pressure on c7. Therefore the queen recaptures. Now we see bishop d6. Bishop g5, classic tricky Magnus move. I dare you to play f6, weaken the structure more. Lee says no, moves the queen, doesn't want to lift the king's kilt, and now we see takes on c4. Castles played, rook c1 intensifies the pressure. We're rattling through, it's speed chess, it's 70 moves, there's so much more drama to come. Knight b6 played, hits the queen, poker face from Lee. He's hoping Magnus doesn't spot it, but he does, he's the world number one, and now after knight 8 to d7, Magnus takes the centre. Dominated. An iron curtain. e5, one of the best ways to fight against that already. But rook e8 selected, queen b5 on the board, and look at that for a strong female lead. Modern screenwriters proud. Now we see queen b8 played. That's a penetrating gaze of the rook, so it sidesteps and the c pawns preparing to push. Bishop d2, Magnus looking to round that one up like a cowboy. b3 now played, chucking the pawn, and Lee's a bit desperate. He's down to just 16 seconds now, really low on time. Magnus over a minute, down a pawn, ominous, but he starts to fight. Do not go gently into that good knight. Centre under fire, bishop e3 played, takes on d4, and taken with the knight looks so natural, headed for c6. But Magnus does this one, keeps an eye on the e5 square here, and now after bishop f8 we get some amazing time scramble chess from Lee. Fair play. He's on 5 seconds here. Watch this. h4 on the board, h6, now we see bishop f1. Love when grandmasters do this. You know, the job is done on g2, you're biting on a pawn, let's activate those snipers. Now we see rook c8, Magnus swaps off, and what do we see soon? Bishop b5, queen c7, there's a queen trade on the way. Magnus loving it. But first, he goes king g2. That is tidy. Tidier than the forest floor when a bird of paradise prepares to initiate the mating dance with a female. Now this knight hops into c5. Queen under fire, poker face. Magnus of course sees it. X-ray on the queen there, which is undefended, so no time to take the pawn. Now queen d6 played, threat renewed, so Magnus covers with queen c2. The knight still holding the bishop. Excellent pony, good job. Now knight c to d7 played, and queen c6. Magnus offers the first of about 1,000,000 queen trades. He loves it. His hand's shaking. He's not used to having the ladies on the board this deep in the game. Queen b8 played though. Lee wants to stay tricky, attack, and now look at this. This is the stuff of nightmares. A knight hopping in, crazy tactics, using some weird tricks when you're on just seconds. But Lee does well. He simply takes the knight. Magnus takes here. This is his point. Piece for piece, balance restored. Again the queen trade offered. No thank you Magnus, I know what you're like. f3 now covers the pawn, and it's a defensive bathtub. Beautiful stuff. Given the exclam because it's the only defensive move. Knight g6 now played, and this one going on a tour of the world. Heading back into the game. Bishop c3, cemento, and queen a1. Invading, tricky. Magnus goes g4 for the score to give himself room. Queen c1, tiptoeing in. Queen d4 centralizing, check. This queen blocks. Obviously Magnus wants to trade. Again it's declined. Bishop hit, retreating. Ignore the question marks. They're playing on seconds now. Magnus has caught up on the clock. We're going to keep rattling on with the game. Just stop at the major moments. Knight c6, re-entering. Now queen d1 offers another exchange. Queen b6 played, and Magnus plays a big blunder here. He pushes forward with f4. Queen e3, a huge move now. Hit 2 pawns at once, and one's going to drop. But missed. Knight b4 played. Magnus should go queen d4 now, but for once he doesn't go for a queen exchange. He goes bishop f3 instead. Now queen b5, queen e2, loves it. No, not happening, and look at that. Huge threat to land the fork. So Magnus gets out the forking way, covers the pawn, and bishop c5 preferred, but not played. Queen d7, given the massive blunders. I guess because it's in some kind of pin here. Queen d2 is apparently strong. Even then there's knight c5 and you cover, so I'm not sure why it gets such a big blunder mark. I didn't click crazy down because nothing like that was played. Magnus goes e5. That bishop now laughing all the way down to the a8 diagonal, unopposed. Bishop c5 comes, bishop e4 now, knight under fire, knight b4 preferred by Stock Barnacle, but knight f2, much trickier move. I love that one more, and it produces an issue because Magnus goes bishop c2, we get queen c6, looking for some nasties. Queen f3 covers, given the miss, but okay, looks so natural. The engine wanted bishop e1, and now you can go queen a6, but queen e8 is played. But hang on, king g2, queen d8, and it sets up this threat to go queen h4, but Magnus doesn't respond. You know, king g3 is one of the top ways to go. He plays f5, given the massive question marks. You can actually go queen h4 now, but I can understand why it didn't happen, because you allow this check along the back rank. Now, if you step here, you just get absolutely kebabbed by the bishops. You know, that is game over. This is one really nice checkmate that can land on the board. And if instead, after this, and this, you don't go king h7, you go bishop f8, well, this is the way the line goes, basically. White has to actually come back with the queen, because say you carry on attacking, you know, take here or something, this is the problem. Yes, the knight drops, but you take off the queen with a whoosh. This is the problem at the end of the line. So that was the way to go, technically, but missed. Instead, bishop b6, and look at Stockfish have an absolute hernia once more on the left-hand side here. Magnus now takes, pawn recapturing, and the lady invades, hitting 2 sensitive points. You can't cover it all. If king f7, I didn't click down, but surely that's bad. Maybe the bishop comes here or here, you know, you drive it away. These bishops horrendous, so the king just sidesteps. Magnus takes the pawn. He's now 2 pawns to the good, and knight d3, centralizing, again threatening to go to Forktown. Population Magnus, he spots it once more, not only hitting the knight, but setting up this deadly checkmating battery. So you can't move the knight, right? It's stuck. So queen d5 check was played, king f1, queen h1 check, and it's at the stage now where Lee's in desperado perpetual check mode. The knight's hit, as said, it can't move or you get mated. So it checks from c1 here, king sidestepping, stumbling, check, check, dropping the knight, but the checks now begin. Can Magnus escape these? This queen bouncing around, amazing geometry here. It's like a big game of kiss chase, but the king's running away. Go away, you weirdo. Finally, the check is blocked. Now it brings it round here, but watch out. There's a problem. King d3, and if you start checking more and more and more, well, the bishop's dropping. Plus, this one can even start dropping. There's all sorts of problems. This square's covered. This square's covered by the queen. So what to do? Lee tries bishop c5, getting it out the way. But now Magnus checks from the back rank, and here we see resignation, because if you go king h7, well, this is simply a checkmate. You know, you could even go bishop g8 if you wanted to mate in 4 and torture your opponent, but this is a mate in 1, probably good enough. So this was the final position. Such a fun game that this was even how Lee reacted to it at the end.
This ain't fair. This just isn't fair.
And there we go. Wow. And he applauds his opponent.
Classy guy, especially in the face of absolute Magnus domination. Now, I'm recording this while the match is still going. I've got some stuff to do later, so I don't know the final score, but I'll flash it on screen now. Presumably, it was a Magnus absolute smash job. That was the way it was heading, you know, when I left it. I hope you enjoyed. Smash subscribe if you did, and check out the video on screen for another exceptional game of epic chess. Thanks a lot. Cheers.